How to making a metal throwing tomahawk. Tomahawks were used as tools and weapons by many of the native tribes that inhabited North America prior to its colonization. These general-purpose instruments have enjoyed recent popularity in the form of tomahawk throwing competitions and tournaments. Whether you plan on using your tomahawk to learn a precision-based skill or displaying it as a decorative piece of historical memorabilia, you can make your own hawk much like the Native Americans did so many years ago. Collect your tomahawk making supplies. To make your own throwing tomahawk will require some metalworking tools and raw material. Before you get started, you should gather 1/4 plate steel, 3/4 heavy gauge metal pipe, cutting goggles, fire extinguisher, hacksaw, heavy insulated gloves, plasma cutting torch, cutting laser or other steel cutting tool, pipe for handle, striker for lighting torch, welding equipment, file or grinding wheel. Determine your method of cutting. To cut steel you will need an appropriate metal cutting torch or access to a mild steel cutting laser. If you do not feel comfortable operating a high-temperature steel cutting torch, you should ask your local hardware store about places you might take mild steel for fabrication. Prepare your work area, if necessary. You don't want any flammable materials around if you intend on using a plasma torch to cut your tomahawk head. Bare earth or concrete will reduce the possibilities of a spark from your torch causing a fire. Working on a steel table that's a comfortable height for you is recommended. Be wary if your table or anything else has a coating. These can sometimes be highly flammable, and the fumes can be toxic. Outline the shape of your head if cutting by plasma torch. Draw the desired shape of your tomahawk head on your steel plate. To do this, you can either use a soapstone or permanent marker. Set up your cutting implements, if necessary. You will need to hook up the appropriate tanks and gauges, turn off the necessary regulators, put on your gloves, and light your torch with your striker. If you haven't performed this process in a while, you may want to revisit how to use a cutting torch, or instead of using a plasma torch, find a facility nearby that has a laser cutter you can use to fashion your tomahawk. Cut your plate steel. Make sure your plate is affixed to your table with clamps and be mindful of these while using your torch. Do not use clamps that are unable to withstand a considerable degree of heat, as these may melt. Arrange your plate at your workstation so that in cutting you will not damage the surface on which your plate rests. Sharpen your tomahawk head. Now that you've got the head of your tomahawk cut to size, you will need to sharpen it so that when you throw your hawk it sticks in your target. Both sides should be beveled, and the point sharp. You should use your file or grinding wheel to accomplish this task. Fashion your handle. Take your metal pipe and cut it down to size with an appropriate metal cutting saw, like a hacksaw. The ideal length for your tomahawk will be between 16 inches and 21 inches depending on your preference and body type. You should start with a longer handle and give it a try before cutting it down to size. You can always remove more of your handle once you have discovered it is longer than is comfortable. Attach the axe head and handle. Prepare your welding equipment as you normally would, or seek the assistance of a skilled welder to guide you in the process. You will need proper safety gear, like a welding jacket, welding helmet, and a welding gloves. If you only require a welding refresher, check out how to weld. Once your equipment is prepared and your safety equipment put on, light your torch and weld your axe head to your pipe handle. Grind or file away any remaining burrs. The metal cutting and welding process isn't always clean. You may have residual burrs or slag left over from making or attaching your axe head. Using your file or grinding wheel, smooth any irregularities or deformities in the metal of your tomahawk. Add finishing touches. If may want to add an identifying feature to your tomahawk to make it more personalized, now is the time. You should also think about adding a wrap to your tomahawk handle to give it additional grip. Tips. Always follow proper safety procedure when using tools. Allow all glue, epoxy to dry completely before handling your tomahawk. Warnings. Exercise caution when using metal cutting or welding equipment. You should always observe proper safety measures when using these kinds of tools. Be careful when using a grinder or stone cutting saw. These kinds of equipment can cause serious injury if not handled properly. Things you'll need. Making a throwing tomahawk. 1/4 plate steel. 3/4 heavy gauge metal pipe. Cutting goggles. Fire extinguisher. Hacksaw. Heavy insulated gloves. Plasma cutting torch, cutting laser or other steel cutting tool. Pipe for handle. Striker for lighting torch. Welding equipment. File or grinding wheel.